COOGS House. After a big commitment over the weekend in the transfer portal, Houston has the best secondary in the entire Big 12.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, a podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. If you're enjoying the conversation but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below if your chili has beans in it. Big discussion in the Ainsworth household. Talk more about that later. But today's show is brought to you by Game Time. This place get last minute, gets the lowest price guaranteed. And again, more on that later. I got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Okay. I want to talk some about the future of the Houston Cougars in the last segment. 2026 is going to be a fun recruiting class to build for sure. I want to talk some about next year's secondary being the best in the Big 12. And a big part of that is their latest addition, Keionte Scott, transfers in from the University of Auburn. So I want to talk some about Scott and then how that makes this the best best secondary in the Big 12, and then some about looking even further down the line in 2026. But Keionte Scott comes to Houston, right? Auburn, it's kind of an up and down career for him. Had an exceptional 2022 and a really even stronger 2023 season while he was there. And then 2024, he had a big dip in production, and a lot of people chalk that up to a lot of things. I think negative folks online, if you look at Auburn message boards, talk about, getting a bit NIL payday off the 2023 season and whatever, and da. I don't buy that Willie Fritz and company are going after a guy when that's the case, right? I don't think that's the kind of kid we got here. That's certainly what Auburn fans, it sounds like, are saying out there. It really looks like, frankly, between scheme changes and personnel changes, he was asked, when you go back and watch, he was asked to do a lot of different things in 2024 at Auburn. He played some corner in the slot, some corner on the outside, not as much, but then some low safety as well, doing a bunch of different things for them. And truthfully, his bad season at Auburn was notably worse than his good seasons, but not the worst thing that could have ever happened to a guy. He did have, per Pro Football Focus, recorded 4 missed tackles and 19.2 yards per reception, just 2 touchdowns. I really think the more condemning number, if you look at his analytical stats and stuff like that from his worst year at Auburn, 2024, was that he allowed 72.7% receiving percentage. So what that means is guys in his area are catching the balls thrown to them at a nearly 3 out of every 4 times, right? That's not great. But I will say that his numbers are so much better in 2022 and 2023. 2023, that same reception percentage was down to 52.9, and he played more snaps and coverage that season. And I think the biggest thing here, as we're looking at it for the Houston Cougars, is that in 2022 and 2023, his DB's coach was one Zac Etheridge. Yes, the same Zac Etheridge that has been at your Houston Cougars for just over a year now, right? And so I think this is obviously a reuniting of Keionte Scott and Zac Etheridge, where they had a ton of success at Auburn as a tandem, right? They just speak the same language as far as things go. Things worked when they worked together, right? And frankly, if you're Keionte Scott and you want to have a shot at playing at the next level, getting back with the coach that had you playing at the highest level you've ever played is probably the best way to do that. Now, as far as his measurables go, he's lifted at 6 foot, listed a $190. I think he looks really quick. I don't know if I'd call him like a 4.3 burner type or anything, but certainly looks quick for a guy that's 190, 195 pounds. And I think that his size pulls him into the box most naturally, right? As far as a box safety goes, maybe a nickel corner, so you're closer to the line of scrimmage. And by the box, I mean tackle, linebacker depth, etc. You saw AJ Haulcy play in and out of that some a year ago. You saw Hershey McLaurin play in and out of that some a year ago. I think that the other thing he brings is he's really good in the return game. That same quickness we talked about. He can break through tackles, 195 pounds, right? He took one in the house in 2023. Again, playing with Etheridge. Etheridge has a 80.8 Pro Football Focus return grade as a returner in 2023. Again, that's the magical year, right? Which I'm trying not to think about 2024 too much. And it sounds like because he plays all these interior spots, he had a lot of positional crossover with what Houston got out of Hershey McLaurin last year. And it also sounds like, in texting and reading between lines and trying to get people to say stuff they don't quite want to completely admit, but we'll kind of hint at, they had we'll say, private or a pretty good idea that Keionte Scott was going to commit fairly early on in the process. Not necessarily early on in the start of the transfer portal window, like they got Conner Weigman, but certainly once he started saying, "Hey, I need somewhere else. I need some, grass is greener. I need to get out of here for a second." I think Etheridge was a natural connection, a coach that they'd gotten along with before, and so on, right? Well, McLaurin was in the NFL draft in the pool, and then the JUCO rule passed where he has more eligibility because he played a year of JUCO and that no longer counts against his eligibility. And so he pulled his name out of the draft. And it sounds like between the somewhat, we got a good idea, we're going to get this guy / private commitment, and McLaurin deciding he wanted to come back to college football, that's kind of where the overlap here didn't quite go McLaurin's way. And, bluntly, Hershey's got a year left to prove on video he can play at the NFL and play at the NFL level. I think his tape from last year was pretty good, right? He was going to go pro off of it, or going to try, but he's going to go find somewhere we can get more, I don't want to say guaranteed, like you can guarantee it get snaps, but a better chance of getting all of the snaps as the low safety. And so I think that that's also had to do some with that. I think people were really upset that McLaurin entered the transfer portal after committing to come back to Houston. Certainly one thing I necessarily saw coming, but positionally, when you have a commitment from Keionte Scott within 12 hours, positionally, this seems to be kind of the overlap. Right now, this continues a long stretch of this SEC to Houston connection. This transfer portal, when they start off with Weigman, Wyckoff, start off at A&M before going to Cal. He's now coming to Houston. Jason Brooks, also an offensive line, start off at Vanderbilt before going to Oklahoma State, now at Houston, right? You got Jordan Allen, LSU. Will James spent a year at Mississippi State. A year ago, you flipped a guy like Christian Braithwaite from LSU. Everyone kind of assumed Mo Williams was going to go to an SEC school. He ended up coming to Houston, which wasn't really a flip, but felt kind of like it. This SEC connection to Houston, the SEC in the league that at least media pundits and whatever think is the best in college football, guys are following the path to Houston from there, right? On the coaching staff, we got a number of different positional coaches, but the big guys, Slade Nagel, offensive coordinator, was a positional coach in the SEC just last year, and Austin Armstrong comes to Houston as a defensive coordinator after having served in the same role for 2 years at Florida. And I feel like what's interesting there is that Houston and Keionte Scott being his position coach and himself both coming from Auburn, Houston is just plucking guys out of that. It's like, okay, if this is the place you think all the talent is, national media level, landscape, whatever, let's go find the talent there, right? That's just on top of, doesn't negate the fact that they're pulling a bunch of top end high school kids out of the city of Houston. Doesn't negate the fact that they're doing a great job in recruiting the Bayou and all that kind of stuff. They're just also in these transfer portal windows going out and getting guys that have played on what the worldwide leader would tell you is a top-end league, right? And they're coming to Houston now. And I think that's a really, really interesting thing to see as you see this. Houston's currently, per On3, got the 45th best recruiting class nationally when you combine both high school and transfer kids, 7th in the Big 12. They've got down 20 official commitments at a high school and 14 at transfers. I think that number is going to actually get a little higher and actually could pull Houston's national ranking to an even better spot. But on the whole, it's inarguable that this recruiting cycle, the 2025s, and the transfer portal is a overwhelming success. You found a quarterback in Weigman, getting talented skill guys like Keionte Scott, we just mentioned on the defense side of the ball. You also brought in a bunch of offensive weapons we talked about in the past. I'm sure we'll get into more as the week goes on. And you pulled in big, strong linemen to lead you up front. Great showing out of Houston. And I want to talk about how this leads to Houston having the best secondary in the Big 12 in just a moment. But first, before we get too far, I do want to remind you that this show is brought to you by our buddies over at TurboTax. Now, this message is from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms and all. I don't do paperwork. I don't do that very well. Waiting and wondering if you're going to get any money back. Now, doing your taxes is easily uploading your forms to TurboTax Expert, matched with your unique tax situation. An expert's backed by the latest technology, cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy, and they work on your taxes. You get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. Oh, you get to go about the rest of your day. There's no stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes with Intuit TurboTax, an expert now on TurboTax.com, only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. To guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Parker Ainsworth is the Locked On Cougs. You're bringing out Houston's big addition to the secondary and how Houston now has the best secondary in the Big 12. I don't want to start by, I guess, looking back and saying, like, they were pretty darn close to that a year ago, right? The Big 12 was not the offensive league it was in, like, 2011, 2012. There were some ground and pound teams, some good defensive teams, and, Heisman Trophy winners and stuff like that, right? But on the whole, it still was a league that had a lot of points scored in it. It wasn't that it's dramatic, obviously, but it was a lot of points scored. And Houston's defense managed to come in ranked really high last year. They finished the season, again, a season that they went 4-8 in. We're not an impressive record or anything like that, but their defense was 40th in total defense, 28th in passing yards allowed nationally, right? Now, I know on the front part of that defense, you're losing Keith Cooper as a pass rusher, and he's going to the NFL. It's going to be fun to watch him play on Sundays. But on the whole, most of your secondary is coming back off of that already very talented defense. And before we get into the personnel of it, the defense should be on the field even less given the improvements you're making on offense, right? Last year, the defense would spend 2/3, 3/4 of the game sometimes on the football field. Well, that's a lot of snaps. That leads to things like a lot of yardage. Frankly, there's more chances to make a bust and have a touchdown allowed. Like that's not a good recipe for success, right? And I understand. I can see the commenter typing right now. Yes, a great defense. Their job is to get off the field, right? Like, okay, got it. But on the whole, the offense also has to be complementary, right? Last year's was not. This year's is visibly already better. You're hoping that it is, right? From a personnel standpoint, you look at last year's very talented defense. You had Latrell McCutchin coming back at corner. Jeremiah Wilson thought about leaving, coming back at corner. Kentrell Webb, safety, coming back at safety. Oh, and AJ Haulcy, future pro, first team All Big 12, Phil Steele, All-American honorable mention, led the Big 12 interceptions. Again, lucky he's not going to the NFL right now. He's coming back as well. Then you're like, okay, that's 4 of the 5 spots. Looking for someone to play that 5th spot. We don't necessarily know exactly what Austin Armstrong is going to want to do with this secondary coming from Florida, but most every defense in modern football needs a 5th DB on the field. Insert Keionte Scott, we just talked about in the first segment, right? Who plays that nickelback / low safety position. Again, you're reuniting him with Zac Etheridge and seeing what kind of a tandem you can create there if you can get the same magic you saw from him in 2023. If someone breaks a shoelace, you can see someone come in at that point in the game. You bring in Mark Stampley, the safety from Georgia, was an all Sun Belt performer, had 3 interceptions and a forced fumble last year, and moved from corner to safety mid-season. So again, a guy with some versatility, can sub a few spots. and has been a experienced college football player at a high level and was excelling at the level he was at. Comes to Houston and the Big 12. Okay. Also, that's just Stampley came in over the weekend. You got Jordan Allen from LSU, who was a highly ranked recruit when he went to LSU, had limited snaps while he was there. But if you're getting that high-end 4-star kid, I think that's worth pointing out that that's a good football player as well. You get a chance to develop him, get him on the field. Will James, who's at Southern Mississippi, he was at Auburn out of high school in 2023. Yes, the same beloved 2023 Zac Etheridge was there. That keeps on coming back around. He started every game at Southern Miss last year. Really good tackler. His PFF grades are pretty good. He was better in coverage. Again, per PFF grades, I only watched like highlights on YouTube, but per PFF grades, it looks like he was better in coverage against like higher caliber opponents, which I think is interesting to see, especially considering his coverage, like his snaps and coverage count was really kind of the same against most teams. And so, I think that's an interesting guy to keep in the back of your mind is like, what is Will James going to play? Is he going to be a corner, low corner? Is he going to be an outside corner? Where's he going to play? Who's he going to fill in for? Where's he going to fit? Again, he's relatively young. I don't think he's like anywhere near done. And speaking of relatively young, remember that Maurice Williams guy? High-end recruit in 2024. He played a little bit last year, but not a whole lot. A tremendous spring game in the spring of 2024. Just playing at a position that's very crowded with Kentrell Webb and AJ Haulcy, all those kind of things. Well, Mo Williams was a high-end 4-star, one of the highest to ever come to Houston at high school himself. You think of with a year in the weight room, a year in the speed program, a year at Division I football. The guy is only going to keep finding more spots to get on the field. The secondary is really, really talented. Now, they have 2 corners with some length, especially Latrell McCutchin with some real length out there. Outside of that, the biggest knock you could put on this guys is you don't have a whole bunch of the 6'4s running around or whatever. And I don't know how many true 4-3s you've got. But on the whole, these guys are all very solid in coverage, pretty sound tacklers. And then, frankly, what I appreciate as a guy that likes to run the football as an offensive guy, they've got several guys, right? Scott, Haulcy, to some degree also Webb, although he typically was lined up pretty far away for this kind of stuff. Go back and watch Will James, watch some Mo Williams high school tape. Several guys that will knock your block off. And these guys, when they fill down to run, you saw Haulcy do it a lot last year. When they fill down in the run game, they fill hard. And I think, truthfully, that's almost to the benefit of their coverage because that receiver that's supposed to be blocking them sees how they're tackling, right? Like, this is more of a psychology part of football than the X's and O's part of football. But if I'm playing receiver and I'm coming in through in a crack and I see I'm supposed to block you and I see you fly 1,000 miles an hour and take a helmet off of a running back, I'm going to be thinking about that the next time I'm supposed to catch the football, right? Like that's a very natural part of the game. It's very, very like football's a violent sport, right? But it's hard not to have that cemented in the receiver's, mindset. And then you're also in filling that hard in the run game, working that receiver trying to block you. And that makes that job really difficult. And that makes it, frankly, not a playoff. Sometimes you'll see receivers try and take plays off, stuff like that. Like that really, really works them as well. I like the secondary a lot. I think the reason it's going to be the tops in the Big 12 is because you've got continuity at 4 of the 5 spots. You got talent at that 5th spot and all the depth spots. And frankly, you've got some young guys, again, Jordan Allen, Mo Williams, that can kind of elevate themselves and like play with really talented guys around them and kind of like the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing, right? I think it's a really, really good group for them. And frankly, look, I don't know. I don't know who's going to have a bunch of success passing the ball against the University of Houston. I don't see it happening. I know I can hear Cam Stewart of Locked On Baylor talking about Sawyer Anderson and who knows, whatever Texas Tech's paying for XYZ quarterback, and I'll hear from Chris Level, or whatever. And Drake Toll, locked on Big 12, seems to never think Houston's going to be good at anything, and he'll talk about go up and down or whatever. That they can have their prerogatives. We'll have the football field next fall. This is a really, really good secondary. And I really think that when you factor in the shifts in the roster from last year to this year and so on, they've got a real chance to be the best secondary in the Big 12. And maybe I'm enjoying looking at the future too much. I don't know. But in the last segment here, before we get out of here, I want to talk a little bit about the future, the class 2026, and the quarterback coming in that class that had an incredible weekend, and one you kind of want to go back and watch. Talk about that in 1 second, but first, I got to remind you that today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Best place to get last tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. As we wind down the college football playoff, it's an incredible experience. You got to get tickets to it. And so if you're going to get tickets to something like that, college football playoff game, big Houston basketball game, whatever, you got to go to Game Time to do it. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for events even easier. Filters out all the fluff and only shows you the incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Recently, I used Game Time Picks for actually holiday gifts for games, giving people an experience, right? Was kind of a big thing for me this year. Browsing through the deals is a breeze, great value, all kinds of seats all throughout the venue. You could see exactly what's going to look like from that seat in that arena for that type of event. All-in pricing, didn't have any surprises at the end. The on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee give me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right. On Friday's episode, we talked about how on Saturday there was a big high school all-star game, the Navy All-American game. And people commented, yes, it was formerly the Army All-American game. They've changed over, right? But same game, been played for a long time in San Antonio. And frankly, 100 players across the country get invited. And it's kind of a big deal when it's a non-senior. It's kind of a sign like, oh, that junior's that kind of good, right? Keyshawn Henderson, 5-star Houston Cougar commit in the class of 2026 as I'm just going to start saying just quarterback, was in the all-star game. Now, going into the game, I think a lot of national conversation, and this show included, had him listed as an athlete/quarterback because on his 7-on-7 stuff and all, when they're wearing shorts and t-shirts and whatever, he plays some receiver, he plays some safety, he plays some corner. He's a little bit of everything. And at Legacy School of Sports Sciences, he's also had to play a little bit of everything, most predominantly an offense quarterback, but they just got to get ways to get him the ball, right? And then on defense, they got a stud receiver, he's playing corner. If they don't, he's playing free safety. If they're a run team, he plays strong safety down in the box. He just kind of does a lot of different things, right? He showed up at this game, and I think we can successfully start taking that word athlete in a pejorative connotation off of his position, right? He was a true quarterback in this game. Now, he was really, really athletic in what he did behind the line of scrimmage, fluid in the pocket, able to step up and make plays, bounce around some. He had a couple big highlight plays. There was a 91-yard touchdown bomb he had. The ball went like 40 yards in the air before the receiver was able to take all the rest of the way for the 91-yard touchdown. And another big throw late in the game down the right sideline, or as he was throwing at the right sideline. Great over the shoulder, right in stride, all right in stride. And then he actually had a chance at a second touchdown in the end zone through a jump ball. His receiver couldn't come down with it, but that was a pretty good, hey, go up and get this kind of ball he threw up in the air there. Really, really impressed by him as really a true quarterback. He's been called an athlete for so long, and I still think there's a path to where he gets in the field maybe a little bit in more of an athlete type role before moving into quarterback, just because it's so hard for a true freshman quarterback to come on the field and play right away. And I don't think it means, I use Ryan Tannehill as the classic example but I don't think it means that he has to never play quarterback by any stretch. I think he is a guy that will be a very successful college quarterback. I think Houston's the place he's going to do it. And it was great to see him play so well, ball so hard, etc. He earned MVP of the game. Now, I think it's important to factor in, like, he has a handful of highlight plays, but both all-star teams played everyone on their roster. That means there were 3 quarterbacks on both teams that got real snaps, and it was kind of evenly balanced and whatever. And so Keyshawn managed to put together the only touchdown drive, the only touchdown of his teams. He drove down the field for the field goals as well. He was really, really important to what the West team was doing. They won, and he gets the MVP trophy, again, playing quarterback. Now, I think a couple things here. One, loved how charismatic he came off at all the teammates, the coaches. I mean, people just seemed to love Keyshawn. Very, very quick to, dap up teammates and whatever. And like, even when he's on the field talking to the quarterbacks, like, yeah, like it's a very clear thing that guys on the team like Keyshawn. I cannot stress how important that is for a quarterback. Like, quarterback is such a singular and unique position, more so than a pitcher, especially in modern baseball, but more so than a pitcher, more so than a point guard. Like, your quarterback's identity becomes your team's identity, for better or worse, more often than not. The Trent Dilfer Ravens teams are just not that common, right? Keyshawn was clearly the man on the West team as a junior. Most of those guys are seniors going to college next year, college commitments being announced and so on. And he's a junior leading those guys. I also think it was interesting to see him run because, an all-star game, the break tackle effort isn't crazy. But what that meant was that he was way more strategic in what he was doing. And again, he played a lot from behind the line of scrimmage, in the pocket, in the rollouts, etc. And then to top it all off, if you're new to Keyshawn Henderson, it probably struck you as a little weird. But in accepting the MVP trophy, he put on his raccoon skin cap. And it's this very that's unmistakably this guy that committed to the Houston Cougars wearing the raccoon skin cap. That's the same guy that plays in 7-on-7 where they don't wear helmets, right? They're in t-shirts and shorts. He plays that in a raccoon skin cap. I don't know. I've asked. I've reached out some. I cannot get a real story on the raccoon skin cap. I'm sure we're going to love it. But it's just kind of his thing. and he broke it out and won the MVP trophy. It was really, really fun to watch. Really, really, cool atmosphere. Now, I will say that I had to watch. I recorded it on my TV at home on Saturday afternoon. A lot of stuff going on, but there's a lot on YouTube as well. If you didn't record it, so you can go back and watch some Keyshawn Henderson tape. Really, really impressive quarterback play, though, for a guy that we've been told for so long is a athlete first, quarterback second. It's hard to believe that after what he just did over the weekend. And that's a guy coming in 2026. That's not Conner Weigman showing up this spring, or Austin Carlisle, the one of the top quarterbacks in the Houston area from Ridgepoint, coming in as well to be a freshman next year. I mean, the quarterback room is stacked. And that led to, and I'll leave on this, a very common question over the weekend. I got DM'd several people asking, what's going on? People were kind of surprised an athlete of Keyshawn Henderson's caliber, a quarterback of that caliber, was committed as a junior to Houston. Several people implied that he'll end up somewhere else. And look, I can't see into the future. I don't know how all that shakes down. But what I will say is Houston offered him as a quarterback before anyone else offered him as a quarterback. He's a kid that's crazy athletic. And he's also a kid that, with that athleticism, has a lot of people telling me he can't play quarterback. He's a kid that values loyalty. That's very clear when you hear him speak in interviews. And he's a kid that values the city of Houston, his hometown, right? And I'm not, again, can't see into the future. But I think that little triumvirate there, Houston being in early, saying you can play here as a quarterback, him respecting the city and wanting to play for the city, and him valuing that they said it first. They saw it first, right? I'm not saying Houston doesn't have to find the NIL money and find the ways to keep this guy on campus, because he's worth the pretty penny. He's that good, right? But I am saying that I don't think it's anything like he wants out of Houston or anything like that. Houston's had a great quarterback legacy. The Klingler, the Andre Wares, the obviously Case Keenum is like when more my vintage, but Kevin Cobb before that, or Greg Ward more recently, even Clayton Tune's been an NFL backup, right? Like it's been a great position for this team. There's no reason Henderson can't add his name to that long list. And I have to say that much like Andre Ware won the Heisman at this point a while back before him, being a guy that shows up to play quarterback at Houston at a Heisman caliber level because other places told you wouldn't be a quarterback is a very, very sweet thing. And I hope he holds on to that. And again, I know it's going to cost NIL dollars and all that revenue sharing money and da-da-da-da-da. But that feeling and that taste is really, really important. And I hope he gets that, even at 17 years old. Now, we're going to talk a lot about the rest of the transfers as guys continue to filter in. We got Kansas State wrap up as well, West Virginia basketball coming up, and a couple of the Big 12 basketball games for Houston with record kind of stuff on the line. So a lot of things to get into here at Locked on Cougs. So hit subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell so you know we're live. Locked on Cougs is primarily Locked on Podcast Network is your team every day. Go Cougs.